Hey everyone, Mrhappy here, and welcome to Mondays with Mrhappy, aka Mrhappy Mondays, the weekly Q&A show where you ask me questions and I answer them. Not gonna lie, almost forgot to record this week's episode, and then I remembered that last week I had suggested to myself, live on the episode, that maybe I should record it on Saturday instead of Sunday. Not that I was doing too much with my Sunday, but it was my birthday, so I had forgotten, and so it's like 6 p.m. right now while I'm recording this, so it's kind of late. Mel's making a cake for me in the back, so you might hear some machinery or some pots and pans or something in the background right now. But yeah, that's what I'm doing. Nothing fancy. It's everything going on in the world, you know. Not going to do anything too fancy, but I don't need to do anything fancy. So with that, I am going to record this Q&A, and we're going to try to make it a little quick. And then I'm going to go relax for the rest of my birthday. I'm going to get back on the video making after my birthday's done, but I'm so tired this weekend, and I don't know why. So hopefully everything will pick up within the next week. But with that, thank you to our patrons for supporting the weekly Q&A and the channel altogether. That you get your names to pop up here. You get them to pop up on State of the Realm, which, of course, is a reminder, we are taking off for the New Year week, and we will come back with shows coming in January. So please be on the lookout for that. And yeah, thanks to all of them. Thank you to our Patrons of Darkness, Khuja, Janova, and Kurenai Oni. Appreciate both of you for going above and beyond. And hope everyone had a good holiday. Happy holiday, and is looking forward to not being in 2020 anymore. Because I know I am. Until the aliens show up, that is. Anyway, with that, let's see what the questions look like, and hopefully I've got some answers for them. First question, hashtag Mrhappy Mondays. Hello, Mrhappy. I hope you're doing well. I hope the same for you. So with each passing expansion, the mandatory story content required to reach max level and start progressing on endgame content obviously grows by a significant amount. As it stands with Shadowbringers, it can take a player potentially several hundred hours to finish the MSQ in order to reach max level and start in the endgame related grind. And good use of grind in quotes. Like after a certain point, the sheer amount of leveling and mandatory story content someone must do in order to play the endgame of 14 will become extremely daunting. I mean, it's been a complaint since A Realm Reborn. Like in A Realm Reborn needing to get to like, you know, people getting the 2.0 and then saying like, yeah, you know, but you need to have beaten this, and then Coil was tied. You couldn't do the most recent Coil tier unless you went back and cleared the old Coil tiers. And then when Heaven's Word came out, people complained about having to do all of A Realm Reborn before doing Heaven's Word. It's only gotten, as you've said, worse and worse. I agree. There is eventually, I think, a solution that probably comes to this where they don't entirely make story content mandatory. But a lot of it is the mentality that I guess MMO players have been in. I mean, MMOs, even with their stories, like looking back to the days of like Final Fantasy XI, it's always been something that's like there and you can do it, but it was never, in order to play the game at all, it was never the thing you had to do. You had to do one activity to unlock another activity. So you may have to do this expansion story to unlock this piece of content with Final Fantasy XI. With Final Fantasy XIV, it's linear all the way through. So I feel like they probably do revisit that at some point. Obviously, we've seen with A Realm Reborn and the revamp of that, they're clearly considering it. They're clearly thinking about it. So it's only a matter of time before I feel like they do something to crunch that. Now, whether that comes in the form of a number crunch, we're expecting a stat squish in 6.0, but more along the lines of a level crunch to really expedite the process with which a lot of this stuff does, or the option to just let the player watch a story so far kind of summary if that's something that they want to enjoy. The other thing that isn't directly related to the skip potions, that won't surprise me, but it's only a matter of time, I feel, before they have to make this change. Whether or not they want to, it's going to happen. Hashtag Mrhappy Mondays. Hello, Hatman, a long-time viewer, first-time asker. Welcome. So I have a bonus of a job rework of your choice. I'm pretty happy overall. I just want a couple things for Bard, and that's really it right now. I have two questions. One, I'm an Omni-Tank player, but having trouble finding a DPS that easily translates in playstyle. Any suggestions? Well, it depends on if you want to do positionals or not, because if you were playing a tank, a melee should be the natural progression there. Samurai, pretty easy to pick up. Monk rework, pretty forgiving to pick up and quick to learn, pretty straightforward. Dragoon always been relatively straightforward, a little bit weird getting used to the 5-part combos, but other than that, not too bad. And Ninja, that might be a little far away from you, but any of the melees would be pretty preferable. If you're looking for something without positionals, that combos, and you're used to playing Gunbreaker, the pace of Machinist might also work as well. Two, they aren't going to keep this patch cycle, right? Well, I don't know. Well, I mean, it's every 16, 17 weeks is a new major patch, and they pushed it back 2 months. So honestly, that comes out to approximately December prog. It gets pushed back a little bit further every time. But because so at the end of the expansion, what generally ends up happening is we go 5 or 6 months without a patch because we're going from the end of the expansion to the next expansion releasing. And I say without a patch, but that's, I'm not including the like little in-betweens. I mean, like 5.5 will come out, and then 5-6 months later down the line, 6.0 will come out. So that actually pushes it back another 2 months. So it's very likely that the next major progression, if they keep on this 2-month delayed schedule, probably looks a little bit more like February, for example. And then by later that year, you'll probably be looking at July and then middle of the fall. So occasionally it'll land in December, but it's not like they have set months for set patches. It's just that with a 16, 17 week schedule, it generally ends up, in some places falling around that point in the year. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hello there, Haps. Hope you're doing all right. I hope you had a good birthday and you and the missus and aloha had a good Christmas. Yeah, I mean, it's been relaxing. It's not like we've done anything fancy or whatnot. Just living our lives, like I said, all we can really do in these times. 2 questions again for you this week. Sure. Number 1, if 6.0 we get door bosses again, and I would say not in 6.0 if we get door bosses, it's more like when they decide they occasionally want to do it. I think it'll now always be something in their back pocket, and they've shown that. But instead of doing it, 2, 3 raid tiers in a row, it's something they'll pull out when it feels like it makes the most sense. However, the question itself is, would you like to see the dev move to a 5-tier Savage, so both the door boss and Savage exclusive boss can have full fights? I mean, I'm not going to lie, the door boss and the Savage boss this raid tier is the perfect example of 2 fights that very much feel complete. They may only be 8.5 minutes and 9 minutes long in terms of their overall enrage timer, but they don't. They feel longer than they take because they're very busy. They're very energetic. There's certainly a very good energy about them. And I'm really, really happy with the way that those turned out. So, no, I don't think they will because I don't think they have any interest in splitting up the bosses. And if they're trying to tell a potent in-place story point for Savage, something that's not canon, then releasing that extra tier is going to make people think it is more related to the story than it actually is. Number 2, based on a question you got last week from Unreal, what is one raid fight you would like to see have the Unreal treatment? Quite frankly, a lot of the old raids that people that would be most eligible are not fights I'd want to give the Unreal treatment for one reason or another. Even some of the fights that I enjoy, like Turn 8, which I think is one of their better designed A Realm Reborn encounters, I don't feel like it's aged particularly well. The mechanics are not so much that they're simple, but we keep in mind we're talking about Turn 8 normal. We're not talking about Turn 8 Savage if we're giving it the Unreal treatment. It's just all of those fights in Second Coil were super cheesable except for Nail, but we've had Nail like 2-3 times over, especially with Ruby Weapon now. Not that stopped them from doing Titan and Shiva, so I guess that point's moot. No, there's not really any particular fight. I know some people think A3 Savage, but quite frankly, Coil is the only thing I actually ever imagine them even remotely considering this with. Anything after that needs to be creator difficulty. I don't think they ever go back anywhere earlier than creator, even if they were to revisit this idea, because some of them are too jank and some of them are haven't aged well in terms of their original mechanics. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hello, Mr. Happy, and happy birthday to you as well. Thank you. Appreciate it. Long-time viewer, finally asking a question. All right, good to have you. I'm a summoner main who dabbles in Savage content, and I used to open fights with Devotion, but realized it was better to hold off for better results. I was recently chewed out for a player for stating that I would use my second cooldown of Devotion right as clouds were starting in E9S. He said I should always use it on cooldown and proceeded to berate me. Of course, the party didn't go well at all. Can you provide any suggestions regarding the use of party damage buffs like Devotion, Litany, Embolden, Brotherhood, etc.? So a lot of this depends entirely on the buff and what other buffs are lining up with it. In the Party Finder, most people don't care about properly lining up buffs. They just press buttons whenever. It's something that really falls more into pre-made groups or statics, or at least groups of Party Finder individuals who care a little bit more about their buff lineup and whatnot, depending on the party they actually have. The way you line up buffs changes depending on who's in your party. When you have a ninja, you have that 1-minute timer on the trick attack pretty much every time. So meeting that every time with something is usually pretty important. Now, if you have a Dragoon who has a 3-minute cooldown in the form of Litany, then you also have to weigh in what other jobs. A Machinist and their reassemble, they don't care about hitting their reassemble inside of a battle litany. The rest of their abilities they care about. A warrior doesn't care about getting their inner release inside of a litany because they're automatically critical hitting for the entire thing. So it really depends on the job. This also includes your opener. Sometimes as a machinist, and I'll use them as an example since I have more experience here, you've heard me make mention of saving your reassemble for the second drill as opposed to using an unbuffed drill at the beginning. That's because I'm used to raiding with compositions where that's generally more beneficial. You know, I have a trick attack, I have an embolden, or I have a devotion, or I have something else. But if I just had like a Dragoon and a Scholar with Litany and Chain, I wouldn't care about that. I would definitely open with the reassembled drill because I'm not benefiting from anyone else's buffs in any meaningful way. So in the Party Finder, the person is right in the degree that most of the time people don't give a shit. But if you want to be optimal about it, then yeah, if you're going to have to devotion during clouds and not everybody's going to get hit, that's definitely a problem. Although I'm almost certain that it's possible to hit everyone with devotion there, even if they're a little spread out. It depends on how far back the casters are. You might miss like one person, and it might be a healer given your position, but no, you're on the south side. You would miss the south or north. You would definitely, if you're going to miss anybody, miss the range DPS on the southern platform. So yeah, that's kind of rough. But it's, and then also like as a dancer, I'm not going to technical step if I can't hit everybody with it. It's all sorts of weird things. And I think this raid tier has a lot of really bad 2-minute timings. Machinist is, again, really comfortable to play because you don't have to give a shit about anyone else's 2-minute timings. You're really just going to wildfire pretty much on cooldown in this raid tier outside of a couple of scenarios. So it's tough. But in the Party Finder, honestly, I would not even talk about it to the Party Finder. I would just do it. And whatever. If the party can't get past like tiles or panels or clouds or whatever, then quite frankly, who cares about lining the buffs up? Who cares about what's optimal? You know, you can beat these things without caring that much about how your party lines up with stuff. So unless you're in a static, it's probably just going to boil down to that, sadly to say. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey Haps, first time asker outside of your stream at least. Hope you and your girlfriend are staying safe and doing well. We are, and thank you for your well wishes, and I hope you're doing well also. My question is, what do you think of the developers taking away direct hit from tanks? My co-raid leader mains Gunbreaker and has been talking about it lately. As a red mage main, I still have 3 stats I need, but I feel like he's getting slighted by not having direct hit substats in gear anymore. Am I nuts for thinking so? Thanks for everything you put out for guides and videos. They've been great and appreciated. Thank you. So I have mixed feelings about this. I think more stat options are always a more interesting gameplay dynamic. A lot of the times it's very moot because people will calculate things into min-maxes, and then who cares what stats you have available? Whatever you do have available, people are going to figure out whether or not you want it, how much you want of it, and that's going to be considered a relative norm. When you see someone who doesn't meet those norms, even if they're playing well, you'll still look at them and kind of shake your head and go, that's kind of weird right there. I don't know if I agree with that. And some people are far more aggressive about that disagreement and stance. So the idea of taking a stat away from the job, while I think it makes sense from the gearing standpoint of what tanks have to do right now, you know, your average tank player goes, that's a DPS stat, you know, I'm a tank. They have to be told that that's something that's, you know, a good idea to go for. So it's not self-explanatory within the game itself. Whereas, you know, you look at piety and it's like mage, it's not like, you know, a red mage can go for piety because it's a healer, a healer stat. But, you know, at the same time, tanks are going for direct hits. And then healers, honestly, who don't need any more healing stats, go for direct hit as well. So it's all sorts of weirdness when it comes to that. That being said, stats are one of the biggest things about this game, that whether or not you care about how many stats you have, the actual scaling of the stats have been so much of a problem that the fact that direct hit is as effective for tanks is part of a larger problem. But that problem isn't named direct hit, it's named crit. With crit scaling off both your critical hit chance and critical hit damage, it just scales too exponentially to the point where, you know, there's maybe a spell speed build for Black Mage, or, you know, maybe a healer wants spell speed, or maybe you want a specific amount of skill speed. But then you look at crit and it's just like, how can I get as much of this as possible? And yes, there are crit tiers versus the efficiency of direct hit tiers versus the role that you're actually playing. And there are little nuances like that. But it's still, even amongst 14's more structured stance on approaching content, making sure that getting into the game is relatively straightforward and it's easy to understand, that doesn't come off when you actually look at the numbers and how they work, especially with critical hit rate just being as strong as it is, and how flimsy DPS rotations can be if you don't meet certain skill speed or spell speed tiers when you're actually trying to execute them. So direct hit taking away from tanks, not a super big fan. I think it could happen though, and I think they need to look at stats overall when they potentially do that stat squish in 6.0 or sometime later, because something needs to change. I don't think they need like crazy weird stats and like all sorts of this and that and 12 different stats and you have to balance it. They don't need anything like that, but they need to at least look at crits over dominance in the stat game, I feel. Hashtag Mr. Happy Monday. Hello, Haps. Hope the pound of chicken treated you all during the week. It did. Do I have a piece or two left? I think I do. I might not. I don't remember. With the recent announcement of a League of Legends MMO headed by the previous WoW lead, Ghostcrawler, saw that, would an MMO more similar to WoW set the League universe interest you at all? I mean, as much as I don't cover any League content on the channel, it's been something that I've followed very closely over the years. It's probably the year I followed it the least, in all honesty. I've kind of been in my own little world and, you know, trying to keep everything in check for me between what was going on with my mother during this year and just, you know, trying to cope with the pandemic and all of the canceled plans and everything, and just making sure I'm thinking about other people more than myself a little bit more. I haven't really kept up with it at all this year. I'd say definitely the year I've kept up with it the least. That being said, I'm going to be playing Ruined King. I want to play the platformer starring Echo. I want to play the MMO. I want to play the top-down action RPG that they showed us. I'm interested in watching the fighting game. I like League of Legends. I like the world. I like the lore. That's probably the one thing that I actually still keep up with for that. Honestly, I want a Devil May Cry / Bayonetta style game. More Devil May Cry than Bayonetta, since, you know me, not a big fan of Platinum games. I want that with Samira. I think that's her name, Samira. Like I said, I haven't kept up super well. I would be down for that as well, but she's brand new, so she might need to build up. She might need to build up a little bit more of a fan base before she can get anything like that. I'm super interested in it, but we've got other things to deal with before then, or to look at before then. Blue Protocol, obviously, before then. New World, which I had a very positive response to, actually. More positive than I expected from their alpha / impromptu beta when they were supposed to release back in August. So I'm looking forward to this. I always try to look forward to MMOs. There's only really one or two that I look at and I go, I'm not really that super interested. But I also know what every new MMO has felt like to me over the past several years. So fingers crossed, but at the same time, realistic outlook of play it for a few months and then let's see, maybe take a step back. We'll see. Hashtag Mrhappy Mondays. Hiya. Hey. Hope you had a good holiday season so far. Thank you, and I hope the same for you. Long discussion about monetization and gaming here. Feel free to skip to the question at the end. I might, only because there are actually a lot of questions. I see it's about Genshin, talking about it. So let me see what the actual question is and see if I need any context. Do you foresee mobile game monetization becoming more prevalent in core gaming, specifically with free-to-play plus pay-for-convenience models? Is this a bad thing or just a shift we have to get used to? I think there's no answer to that, because there's a lot of people who are very okay with the monetization or are very aware of the monetization. There are, of course, people who have very addictive personalities, people who can be considered prey in those kinds of monetization patterns. That being said, I think it doesn't have much to do with mobile games in particular. I see you mentioned Genshin. That's kind of the big thing. People talking about things like FIFA. I think, since it just came up in the previous topic, I like to think League of Legends. League of Legends and Battle Royales have really, for me, more so set the potentially bad trend for monetization than mobile games. Genshin is just a mobile game that has been fully developed for PC and console. And that put it in a lot of people's eyes, and those more aggressive monetizations. With that, while you don't need to do anything, you're going to get like FOMO, and you're going to feel like, I need to do this now because it's going to be gone. Or like that's very much how those monetization patterns work. But Battle Royales do that too with battle passes. They just encourage playing more than spending, although they do encourage you to spend as well. And then skins and chests and things like that. I mean, Overwatch, League. I feel like those have more impacted it. And I feel like they are a norm. It's just a matter of how acceptable the norm is, how good it feels to get a new skin, to earn a loot box versus buying one. And does somebody who reasonably doesn't spend any money but plays way more than they probably should, how does that person feel versus somebody who maybe plays less but is willing to shell out 10, 15, 20, 50, 100, you don't know how much people are spending on various animations. Well, I guess some of them have animations, emotes and whatnot is what I was going for. I meant to say skins and things like that. I think it's something that can be very bad. We've seen it okay in a lot of ways, but I'm always cautious about any game that does that, because I am more than willing to spend more money than I should in a game. I have no desire to hide that fact. But I need to feel okay about doing it. And that's for me been Genshin and Dissidia Opera Omnia are been like the two games that I really feel that way about right now. So I think we'll see it more, and I think it'll still be up to the individual to decide if it's something that's for them. And being aware of that existing and what it is and what it means to you and the people around you is probably more important than it not existing in the first place. Hashtag Mrhappy Mondays. Hello, Haps, and happy holidays to you. Thank you, and same to you. I made it to E12 Savage on week 2. Hey, with the Party Finder, that's going to be a good thing. I'm sure as you can know, you're going through hell right now. I made it to Lions, and why are people comparing it to Light Rampant? Especially since execution-wise, it's far easier to grasp and not as punishing. It's more so that when it falls apart, it really falls apart. You know, there are some mechanics where if somebody screws up and they kill themselves, that's A-okay. On Lions, if you screw up on the third set, yeah, you're probably just killing yourself, maybe one other person, unless it's a really critical failure. On the second one, you might die, but there's a good chance you take somebody with you, or one or more people on the third one. If you die on the first set, it's Light Rampant, because those Lions are going to go way too ham. So what happens is people have somebody die on the first set, it all falls apart, and then it feels a lot like Light Rampant. But I agree. I saw that mechanic once. This tier, something about E12, and people don't believe me. I saw almost every mechanic that has like tethers or numbers or debuffs, and it literally took me one try to figure out what was at least intended for us to do. Maybe not what is the most optimal thing. For example, with lions, we got there once. I saw the lions with the tethers, I saw the fire breath AoEs, I saw the big ones north and south, and I literally explained the whole thing to my group. I went, oh, okay, so we got to bait these facing away from everybody else, and then the players who don't have tethers need to bait the other two lions. I saw that once. That did not happen with Light Rampant. Light Rampant, I saw people explode, and I go, I don't know what the fuck just happened. That's it. There's a huge, huge difference between the two. But because of that impression of how easily wipeable it is, it gets drawn that comparison. There's also a ton of different strategies for it, which we saw what happened with Light Rampant there. That led to a lot of people getting into discussions about what the ways to do it were. But line strat, it seems the Party Finder is just little by little going full line strat over Billy. And I love it. Line strat is super satisfying, really safe, and way, way easier to deal with than any Light Rampant strat that we had. Even after Sharingan got really popular and it was really easy, I still think line strat just blows it out of the water in terms of how easy it is to execute. So it's just because of the punishment that can happen if somebody dies early. And two, is the overabundance of damage on this tier Square's response to FF logs and greed strats? No, so how do I put this? Instant killing everyone all the time is not a great practice. Final Fantasy XIV has a habit of coming up with an idea for mechanics and then over-executing on it. Damage downs kind of fall into that category, but damage downs encourage people to, more important than anything else, I guess I wouldn't even call it greed, but skipping. It's the same with Doom stacks. Getting stacks of debuffs and then getting Doom instead of just getting Vuln stacks or even outright dying. Because it just kind of gradually falls apart. It delays the death, so it's going to be in the way, most likely. The person needs to be very cognizant of where their body's going, especially on the mechanics that you can die to with the Doom. And it's more satisfying to prog. If somebody gets damage down, then it doesn't mean the fight's over. If somebody dies and then a mechanic happens that needs all 8 people, it's a much different story. So it's better for progression. It's better for understanding new mechanics and progression. It's an adequate punishment for failing a mechanic because it's a 50% damage down, just like it was back in E2S. And it's just overall better of a system to have in terms of recoverability, in terms of learning. Everything about it is, in my opinion, superior. Now, it's okay to have mechanics that insta-wipe if people screw up every now and again, things like Light Rampant, but it's important to make sure you don't do that every single time. And I think that's nice that they have a mix of those kind of things here, where there's some things that gradually fall apart, there's things that punish you with less damage, and then there's things that punish you with if you get hit by this too many times. Some things are meant to counter tank LB3 cheesing, some things are meant to counter greed most likely, and some are just meant to be a different way of punishing the player that's not the same every single time. Hashtag Mrhappy Mondays. Hey Haps, you doing alright? I'm doing alright. You doing alright? I'm doing alright. Just wondering about your thoughts on the difficulty of Unreal. Too easy, too hard, just right? Shiva's DPS check led to a lot of single tank parties, seeing people try to solo heal Titan, which can do. I did it back in 2.1 when Titan came out. Titan Extreme, that is. I have not been able to do it for this tier, but that's because this item level sync makes those mountain busters juicy. That's the only thing I'm actually even scared of. I went into Titan Unreal a couple times. Didn't go great. Gonna go with the static instead. Do you think this is where fights should be? Here's the thing. It's an extreme trial. That's it. It's just one people don't know from ages ago. So you have a mix of people who were there, they know, they were able to do it before. You have people who were paralyzed with fear by this encounter back then, and you have people who have no idea what they're getting into. People aren't used to things like untelegraphed tank busters or needing to almost move ahead of mechanics if your ping is even just a little too high. The punishment for failure, meaning players kind of just die and don't really learn anything. Don't get hit forehead is the best advice you end up having with something like Titan. I think it's just right. It makes for a hilarious party finder, and at the same time, it pushes people to maybe try a few new roles or get used to mechanics the way they were. It introduces people to concepts that might be considered old and outdated, but are never completely off the table from returning. And that's something I feel like was definitely lost a little bit for anyone who's not an ultimate tier raider. Hashtag Mrhappy Mondays. Hello. I'm glad that you made a whole line for hello, because you can tell that you listen to when I talk about people saying hello. I got a couple questions to ask, but before that, I wish you a happy new year, since Monday will be 2021. Hey, I wish you a happy new year as well, and hope you had a good holidays. Anyway, first question. Wow, you have 2 questions crammed in here somewhere. Oh, there's the second one. With some player base not being happy with the current tanks not being different enough, do you think they will possibly bring back some of the old tank stats? No. You'll never see tank stats having stat passives ever again. And I'm confident on that. I don't like to say never again ever since the male Vieira fiasco, but this is something that was very deliberately phased out, and you won't see this ever again. They'd likely just change the way different individual abilities work, as opposed to changing the way tank stances stand out. Also, there's not that many people who feel that way. A lot of the time, it's a very vocal minority that feels this way. And I find that a lot of times these kind of complaints only come from individuals who like to quantify things down to kind of meaninglessness. Like, it's easy enough for me to say every job in the game, I press 1, 2, 3, and the boss falls over. It's absolutely, if you want to break it down to a very core level, true. You say every job has the same rotation. But when you actually get down to playing them and mastering them, you do pick up these little tendencies. Some of them overlap, some of them don't. You notice similar systems about maybe a job gauge. Maybe some feel more meaningful, some feel less meaningful. But this kind of complaint doesn't really match what is happening actually in the game, especially when it comes to the tank stance stats that they used to have versus the way they work now. Second question, do you see them ever adding balconies for apartments? You know, they actually said that was a huge technical problem a long time ago. People have asked for it for years. I've even brought it up. I don't think this will happen. And this is also true of apartments. I don't think they'll ever add like an outdoor equivalent for apartments for you to do things like gardening, for example. The one thing they made mention of wanting to do that I wonder if they ever will do is actually the idea of being able to get bigger apartments through a quest line or through purchasing additional space. I think that's going to be tougher on them than they think, and that's why they mentioned it, but then it's kind of stopped. Like, they haven't really brought it up since. But, you know, I'm still hopeful for that. I don't really care about housing, but I would sure at least like people who can't get houses to feel like their apartments are more adequate than they currently are. Hashtag Mrhappy Mondays. Hey, Haps, how you doing today? I'm doing all right. Low-key, tired, but a good birthday. Just want your opinion on something that occurred to me today. Final Fantasy XI came out in 2002, 1.0 was 2010, A Realm Reborn 2013. More than 7 years since A Realm Reborn. My question is, do you think SE would plan on releasing another MMO after 14? I think there is an eventual future where that happens. I don't think it has any relevance with how old Final Fantasy XIV is. One of the biggest things you have to remember is a company creating its own competition is really weird. This is something World of Warcraft and Blizzard, I should say more specifically, they realized when they were working on Titan, which was originally going to be a new MMO to replace World of Warcraft, or even just to, you know, add another MMO to the market. They decided it didn't make any sense because they were like, wait, we have the most popular MMO in the game. We collect all these subscriptions monthly. We're monetizing things. We have shops, mounts, you know, all sorts of stuff like that. Why would we build a competition to ourselves? It doesn't make any sense. We're just going to split player bases, or we're just going to try to double dip on people. And either way, it's just going to be a lot of effort and maintenance just to maintain two different MMOs. So what did they do? They turned Titan into Overwatch. It got completely reworked into that. I think that Yoshi P has described similar sort of he's described it in a similar way where he's like, you know, it doesn't make sense how much it costs to maintain like an MMO actively, and then we're basically just building our own competition. Originally with 14 1.0, it was to replace Final Fantasy 11. That didn't work out. Then they were going to do Final Fantasy 11 Mobile to replace 11. That didn't work out. So I think they've learned their lesson about trying to replace MMOs or move on to the next one, in that it needs to bring a completely different experience. It can't be mediocre, especially after what happened with 1.0. And the amount of resources it's going to take is going to be so massive that odds are, as much as it might actually pull in revenue, they'd probably rather make more AAA games with online functionality versus building a brand new MMO, which is going to require a whole different sort of infrastructure. I feel like we might see another game as a service with a Final Fantasy name on it at some point, but probably not a full-on MMO. That being said, you also have to remember they do not have 2 MMOs. They have 3 MMOs in Square Enix. This is something that gets by a lot of people. Final Fantasy XI, which is still maintained and has been receiving story updates this year in preparation for their 20th anniversary in 2022. I have not played the last 2 patches of them, but I got to get around to it. Then you have Final Fantasy XIV, 1.0 failed, rebuilt as A Realm Reborn, you know, a lot of lessons learned there. They have Dragon Quest X also. That is an MMO. It's Japan only, but it doesn't mean it's not a lot of resources, and that does still actively get updated. So I don't think they're going to create a 4th MMO, not just a 3rd one, a 4th one, when they could just do a single-player game with some online functionality, kind of almost like Avengers. All right, and this last section here is going to be a lightning round / spoiler section. I just remembered from last week I did not put a tag on when the spoiler section... Oh, did I actually? I'm at the video. I'm almost positive I did not. Okay, I have to remember that for this week because There were definitely some pretty big spoiler questions in there. There were some jokey questions in there. One of them being like, is Aloha short for Aloha Brea? And you know what? He's a cat, so you might be onto something. And then there was a few spoiler-related questions in there. So, like I said, this is spoiler warning at this point, because I'm going to take any remaining questions, and there's definitely going to be spoilers in some of them. So please bear that in mind. So let me see real quick, what do we have here? There is the Summoner Dabbles in Savage. It's 14. 14 makes no effort to teach you how to play. I mean, 14 gives you all the tools. They gradually introduce new mechanics if you're playing through for the first time. The job quest gets you to at least somewhat try to understand the new abilities that you're picking up. And then, of course, there's always self-teaching. I have a bigger problem with how much people don't care about improving because it's LOL just a video game. Because that mentality usually comes from other experiences in life or just from a personality trait that the person has. It's very likely that it's not just because it's a video game they don't want to try and improve. It's very likely that it's just kind of a mentality they have with their more hobby-esque things. You know, it's a more common trope in the gamer industry than I think people give credit for. Not everyone wants to be a Dark Souls hardcore gamer or anything like that. Some people want to just be able to sit back and enjoy a game and not have to think too much. It's relaxation. It's entertainment, you know? And I think no matter what you do, you could literally have a part of the game where if people do not perform at a certain level, they cannot continue the MSQ. And they do technically have that, but the bar is set so low that it really can't even be considered that. And then, you know what would happen? Most people would not strive to improve. Most people would not take these tools, whether they be mandatory or otherwise, and utilize them. They would just stop playing. You'd sooner see that than see people actually want to improve. So as much as I love the idea of Hall of the Intermediate, Hall of the Master, or having more solo-esque challenges that force people to learn things, increasing damage taken in the early levels, increasing damage needed in the early levels to encourage, tanks to use cooldowns, healers to actually heal, DPS to focus more on how well they're actually playing. It's never going to happen because people would sooner quit than improve. It's a sad reality, but I don't think I think no matter what they do, those people who don't want to improve won't. And it sucks, but it is unfortunately very likely the sad truth. Someone asked what Santa brought me. I'm Santa. So, whiskey. Anyway. No, Mel's making me a cake as well. And, well, that's for my birthday also for Christmas. Mel and I did Christmas exchange weeks ago. She got me whiskey, so I guess that's the worst. And I got myself whiskey. So I only drink 1 or 2 glasses a week, but having all of the whiskey around, that's something I like to do. And then there was a question about the towers that have sprouted up after 5.4's MSQ. Do I think there's any particular plot significance to these locations? I do. I do very much think so. I think they're all surrounded around locations that have had horrible disasters. And I won't get too much into it. If you watch the most recent State of the Realm, we'll get more into why that's really important. But Eorzea is fraught with disasters and memories and problems people have suffered. And in making sure that every major location that has a lot of people is very integral, I feel, to the way the plot's going to go forward in 5.5. Some people want to say just happy birthday, happy holidays. Thank you very much for that. I hope you have a happy holidays as well. Some people saying how they think that because I'm, as a YouTuber, saying I don't like dungeons, that the devs consider that. I've obviously had plenty of conversations with the devs. I went to Square Enix Japan. Square Enix flew me out there. I've done interviews with Yoshi P. I've spoken to developers, mostly through official means, like it's always been at like a fan fest or through an email interview. I can tell you right now, they do not care what I as an individual think. They look at everyone. Now, of course, YouTube videos can act as echo chambers for opinions. They can also act as conflicting areas where there's tons of different opinions, but they're pretty level-headed about making sure there's not just some ranting of a maniac versus something that they've tested and seen on the back end and made sure that it's something that makes a lot of sense. A great example of this, actually, when the Weeping City of Mach came out, it was by and far the hardest 24-man raid we'd have. Most of the Labyrinth of the Ancient raids are the Crystal Tower ones. At the time, sometimes people struggled, but they were really considered, you rolled over them for the most part as long as people had some basic understanding of it. When it came to the Weeping City, that wasn't the case. You could fall off, you could get destroyed. Obviously, Ozma is a big thing. And there's very frequently wipes in an Orbone, which did eventually get nerfed, but I could talk about that separately, but I probably won't. They had to go to the forums. People went to the forums and said, this is too difficult. This is supposed to be something that's casually approachable, and the devs' response was, this is the intended difficulty. We're not changing it. So they get it sometimes, like, but they're not looking at me. They don't care what I think. They don't care what opinions I draw out. They're always going to take in as much official feedback as they can, and not just random videos or anything on the internet. They're not watching Mondays with Mr. Happy and going, that dude doesn't like dungeons, let's do less of them. They've said why they're doing less dungeons. They've said that it's because when they started A Realm Reborn, they felt they needed that in order to populate the game. They didn't have anything, so they need to make sure they were constantly adding lots of scenarios and quest lines and things like that. They weren't very focused, they were very quick. They had to just come up with an explanation, something usually lore related, to actually get us back into the hard mode dungeons and then move the plot forward with the other ones. But they ultimately, as time have gone on, they've been like, listen, dungeons are really basic content. If we're going to put resources into our game, we don't want it to be this simple thing. We want to use that for other things, more unique one-time scenarios, or putting them into side content like Bazia. So that's where they've gone. It has nothing to do with YouTubers having opinions. They don't care about that. Someone asking, the 2 pods wall, 2 pods boss repeat 3 times dungeon is, my opinion, starting to feel stale. Was one change you change to the formula, add something interesting? I don't think we need to change anything about dungeons. I don't need them to be vastly different. They serve a very direct purpose. They're not meant to be these labyrinth-like experiences. They're not meant to be lost in these things for hours. They're meant to get people in and out as quickly as possible because it's part of a daily routine. So I don't think they need to make any particular changes. If they want to, they can kind of do what they did with the most recent one, and we could go down 3 different paths, but we return to the beginning every time. Yeah, sure, why not? Or they can make us go in a circle like in Swallow's Compass or something like that. You know, they just don't, I don't think they need to change. I don't think they will change the dungeon formula because it's just not, people need to interpret the purpose of the content, not what the content is actually asking you to do. And it's supposed to be the quick jump in, jump out content, get my daily stuff, get my tomes, get some gear, do some descent, but 15, 20 minutes done. That's all they want out of people from those dungeons. And then what else do we have? I could have sworn there was another one. Somebody complaining about me not liking Nier. It's not blind negativity. Listen, people who don't like that I don't like Nier and are very active about that, something's wrong with you. I don't like something, and I specifically said I don't like the gameplay of Nier Automata. I like the story. I know what happens in the story. I like the world building that's been done with it. I don't care for the gameplay, and I don't like it in Final Fantasy XIV. I think the story hasn't been well done. I know it's supposed to be very backloaded. I played Drakengard. I know now Nier Automata's story. Tried to play it. I did watch the rest of the story on YouTube. And I'm saying every patch, I'll be optimistic. It's just yet to, my optimism has just yet to be paid off. And I've also said I don't like Omega. I don't like Omega's story in Final Fantasy XIV either. It feels very forced and very shoved in until the very end. So we'll see if the very end redeems Nier. I'm actually kind of interested to see if it will. But if I don't like something and you don't agree with it, believe it or not, that's a normal thing. That's acceptable. That's fine. I don't need you to not like it. I'm just not going to like it. So please understand that. What else was there? I feel like there was another one. There's the monetization one. I feel like there was one other question that I saw. Oh, do you think they're teasing a new job in the 5.4 MSQ with Mrhappy? No. She's been there for years. They've even specifically said with Musketeer that they deliberately didn't do it because they wanted to do something new and original. Sticking over with the baggage of 1.0 is not something they want to do because it was supposed to be a new class in 1.0 at some point. The Musketeers Guild. And we just got a range physical. I think we're pretty much headed for a healer and a caster. I'd be very surprised to see any other result for the expansion, but I said I would be surprised to see not a healer or 2 DPS in the same expansion, and we've had that twice in a row. So expectations are always meant to be denied. So we'll see how it actually turns out. And then was there one more? I'm in a casual FC, and some people feel bad about their parses not being high compared to others. I mean, they just have to be willing to practice. People, if your parse isn't high, practice. Do content more. Don't be like, oh, I'm defeated. Just improve. Just focus on improving. That's all you really need. You just have to have I want to improve mentality. Anytime someone asks me a question and they themselves are like, I'm not really happy with my performance. What can I do? That's somebody who I expect to do really well in the future because they care. And just displaying some sort of emotion of caring and self-improvement, most of the time you'll surpass 75% of the people who play this game. And you know what? That's just how it's going to be. There's a theory one. I don't like to get into theory questions all too much because a lot of the times it's a question that ends in the, yeah, sure. why not? Because I rarely have anything to say against it, unless I can literally like shut it down with something that is factually explained in the game. It's just, I don't, it's not something that's my forte. And it looks like that was actually the last question for this week's episode of Mondays with Mr. Happy. But thank you everyone for tuning into this week's episode. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share. Ask a question in the comment section of the video below. And appreciate it. I'm going to go enjoy the rest of my evening for my birthday. And I'll be doing my usual for this week. We're going to try to get a few more videos up for the new, for the new year. I have a few things already written, a few things already recorded, actually. And we'll be working on getting those out. Just not trying to rush any content during the holiday season. Trying to, relax a little bit because it's been a hell of a year. But thanks everyone for tuning in. I'll see you next week. And when I see you, it'll be the new year. So happy new year. And until next time, take care.